Okay, 3, 2, 1.
Groovy.
The Evil Dead and The Evil Dead 2, 1981 and 1987 respectively. That is a huge gap that I didn't know going into this movie. Basic premise, people go into a cabin in the woods, and evil ensues. That's the basic
Did you
premise
say a
of
cabin in the woods?
a cabin in the
We've
woods.
talked about that movie already.
It's so goofy, you guys. Just gagging it up over here.
Aren't we zany?
You zany little goofs. Okay,
Little goose.
so
Zany.
we decided that, well, I decided editing-wise, but it's been decided that for this episode it's going to be more podcasty. We're just going to be talking back and forth. There's not going to be fancy editing or anything. We're just going to be also intermixing these two films together just because there's so much similarity between the two, and it's pretty easy to talk about them both like equally as we go through. So, to start us off, Michael, since you were the scholar of us as far as these movies go, why don't you start us off with like your thoughts on like these two movies, or like even go into the series if you'd like.
Yeah. I love these movies so much. Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 are two of my all-time favorite horror movies. The reason there's a gap, actually, is the reason why there was like, you said 6-year difference
I believe so.
between films is because they didn't even expect that they would be able to make a sequel. I think it's a pretty small company that made the first film, and they didn't think they'd have the appropriate funding. But Stephen King was such a huge fan of the first movie that he talked to the financiers to be able to get the budget to create a second movie. And that's also why with Evil Dead 2, it's kind of almost a soft remake in the sense that they kind of show a slightly different version of the scenes of the original movie. That's because they actually weren't able to
Get the rights.
acquire the original footage. So anyway, but yeah, so this film is so beautifully bizarre and over the top and creative and visceral and imaginative. Both of these films are. There's so many cool effects. It has the perfect amount of self-awareness, the perfect amount of ridiculous moves, tons of great blood and gore. And I love it so much. I think it's funny. I think it has some great terror in it. I think it's super memorable, and it's just a fun time.
Okay, and Nathaniel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I had never seen these movies before, but I loved them both. I really liked just how bizarre they were. I liked that even the lore of it didn't fit really in any category. Like the first one, you could vaguely kind of say it's a twist on a zombie film, but then by the time you get to the second one, it's just nuts. Like it leaves that behind. I think Bruce Campbell is phenomenal in these films. He does a great job. I love the claymation and the stop motion that they incorporate in the film. I think that gives it such a interesting style and keeps it fresh to watch even now. Yeah, I was very blown away by these two movies and had a great time with them.
So yeah, I've seen So seeing Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 both back to back is really interesting. Seeing the kind of dichotomy between the two and like why they lean more into like the kind of goofy side of it. Because in the first one, there are some elements of that, but it doesn't feel as intentional. But with the second one, they lean so hard into it that I go from like being able in the first one to pick apart like things that aren't really that great about it, And in the second one, every single thing feels intentional. Like from even being able to see the strings of some of the actors, like it feels like it feels like, hey, what if we made like this horror comedy that still has elements of horror and still have elements of putting Ash through the ringer and basically giving him like the worst 2 days of his life. And then the way that it ends is like setting it up to where he's still not finished yet. It's exhausting for the character, but they make it fun to watch. And I really enjoy being able to see these back to back. It's not necessary to see the first Evil Dead, but you do gain an appreciation for the process as a whole, and you even gain a bigger appreciation once you realize, like what Michael was mentioning, like the reason for the huge gap between the two movies. And I think that I think the first one's pretty good, but I think the second one is great, and I really look forward to seeing the third one.
Yeah. And the third one is... Go ahead.
No, you're good.
No, yours makes more sense, probably, before we're going with the story, so...
It's an interesting relationship the two films have, because they are so similar, and the second one does feel a lot of ways like it retreads a lot of ground, and it's just interesting as a film series to sort of make a follow-up that's really just like a more marinated version of the first one. Like it doesn't build on the first one in the sense of like carrying the story forward. It builds up the first one in the sense of like, we figured out a more effective way of telling this story, and it just it makes I think watching the two of them back to back very delightful.
Yeah, no, it really does. Like I don't know, like going into the whole movie, like I didn't know what to expect. Like there's barely even any dialogue in the second one, especially coming from Ash. Like you'd expect Ash being the main character to actually have more character to him, but he might even have less character in the second one, as far as like him sitting down even talking about, like, you know nothing about his backstory, you know nothing about like his main motivation in the movie is survive, and throughout the whole movie is just seeing him slowly become more and more insane and just happen upon bad things that are happening. It's not even him that starts all the evil. It was a recording that he found that he just plays in the background, and then bad things just happen.
And it's a chaotic symphony. That's what it really feels like. I think the sort of minimalism they use, whether it's in the script or stuff like that, makes it an art form where, again, you'll see a character get sucked into something and more blood come out than can possibly fit inside a single human body.
Yeah.
Or just like blood splatters over someone's face, right? You know, everything is so excessive and over the top in a way that's so creative and really blows every other horror movie out of the water. Like, you know, there'll be one scene like this in like It or Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, oh yeah, that was a highlight of the movie. That's an average scene in this movie. And there's just so many really creative, out there, bizarre, imaginative ways of including gore and horror, and it's just great.
One thing that I'm glad that they remade was the evil tree from the first movie. Like, they made it much less problematic in the second one, as opposed to like in the first one, where it's like, ooh, that's what it's doing. Oh, okay, this is a pervy tree. And then the second one was like, okay, cool. It's just evil now. It's like the poltergeist tree. It's just trying to eat people from what it looks like now.
Yeah.
It's like, cool, I could actually like this thing now.
It's such a perfect combination to me, I think, of expertise and chaos, in the sense that there are scenes that, you know, have a very shaky camera and feel very homegrown, but then you'll have scenes, especially towards the beginning of the film of Evil Dead 2, where you have the shot of Ash looking at the bridge, and I think they use a model or something, and it just looks so good. And there are so many really impressive creative shots, so many impressive creative techniques that show there's brilliance and artistry behind this. And that's what makes campy, ridiculous, cliche moments that much better, because you know that these were intentional choices. They weren't mistakes.
Mhm.
There's a lot to be said about Bruce Campbell as an actor in this one, because in the first one he's barely a character. It's just by happenstance that he ends up surviving by the end. And in this one, it's almost like he was put in a direction and said, "Hey, I'm gonna let you go. Like, you're just gonna be reacting like how you normally would be reacting in this scene." But except, I don't know. Okay, what confused me about this movie is how they got it to work. Because when your main character loses his hand to a demonic being, and he can't get that hand back anymore, he's like, okay, I'm gonna make the best of it, and then like creates this contraption that will make him able to carry around a chainsaw, and then makes the contraption work to where he's able to like hook it into his chest and like actually rev it up still. And his reaction to getting that is just groovy.
I love, even before that though, the complete like confidence he goes into like chopping his own hand off. Like, his hand gets possessed and he's like, well, I guess this is what I gotta do. And he's like giddily laughing while he's doing it. Like, I just love that level of insanity that character reaches.
I mean,
And you feel like the entire film escalates to that level of insanity as well.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it makes sense for him to go this insane. I mean, when you start seeing, his girlfriend died, he had to bury her, and then he's possessed by a demon multiple times, and then like he's stuck in the cabin where like the things mounted on the wall start laughing at him. It has to chop his hand off, and it has a mind of its own. It all makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but what's great about it though is it's like, if you just leave the first film by itself, it's like a man who just has a bad night that just breaks him by the end of it. But then with the second film, like it begins with him in that same broken place, but by the end of it, he's still just as insane, but it turns into something empowering rather than something that's debilitating. Like, that level of like unhingedness he reaches turns into something that he actually uses to survive by the end, rather than just fall victim to this thing that he's been forced into.
And the show Ash vs. Evil Dead, which I highly recommend, it takes that into another very interesting chapter, where it kind of shows him almost as being demented as the result of the things he had to endure. And like, he became the sort of man he needed to survive those things. But what does that mean for him now in civilized society?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do people handle him when they need him versus when they don't? And I think there's so many great series and movies and all that don't get the attention that they need to be able to continue on. I feel very fortunate we're in the timeline that Evil Dead got to have as much as it has, and still continues to have.
Oh yeah. This is like you said, it wasn't supposed to be, or it didn't seem like it was going to be a sequel. I mean, after 5 years, I would think that it would never get a sequel. But like we said in the last episode, 5 years isn't really that long of a time in the long run. And stories that I've heard, getting a movie made in Hollywood sometimes takes that long. And I'm really glad to see that this became a series and that it was able to transform, given the kind of breathing room that it needed to take on the tone that it needed, and given like the resources that they needed to make it happen. Honestly, of all the movies that we watched, as far as like time-wise, as far as just like going back and retrospectively seeing like whether or not it's aged, this one to me in a weird way has aged the least. Just because if they remade this movie today, I wouldn't want them to change a single thing and use the exact same things that they used in this movie, like down to the way that people act in this movie, down to the writing, down to the way that they do the effects. And I can't say this enough. I saw strings multiple times, but I'm convinced that it was intentional, because this movie it's like a near perfect, like what I would want out of a horror comedy. It's so over the top and so great.
Yeah, and they made the first one with like only $300,000,
Oh, jeez.
which
yeah.
is wild to me.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. Like, the budget really, like, shows, like, what kind of team you're working with, because you could have millions of dollars and still have a movie that just comes out really crappy looking, or you could have a really resourceful team that prepares right and knows how to, like, delve things out, know where to make, like, cuts, and they can come out and make something actually
Mhm.
really special that someone might be able to pick up and say, hey, we need to make that a series.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you guys ready to go into the final thoughts?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. Okay, Nathaniel, wanna go first?
Sure. Yeah, this is, I think, of all the movies we've watched this month, these two, I think, are the ones I'm coming away the most happy that I've seen. Like,
Mhm.
I fell in love with these characters, the world, the franchise, almost immediately. And I think after this, I'm very eagerly gonna watch the third movie and the show and kind of explore what else this world has to offer, because it's been the most enticing, I think, that I've seen in this whole series. And yeah, I would very, very highly recommend both of these films.
Alright, I'm gonna go second. No, Michael, I'm gonna have you close this out.
Okay.
So yeah, I've been like meaning to go through this series for a while now, and I'm really glad that we got to have the chance to get into at least these first two. The first one, it feels like it did feel like a necessary like starting point. You could tell that it's an indie film. You could see all the the imperfections in it, like kind of the surface level in some things that don't feel as intentional, and like, you know, there's some things that are a little bit goofy, but you definitely like see the special parts of it. Evil Dead 2 is what happens when like you soft reboot it, like we were mentioning, and give it a chance to be something really, really special and be something that is totally original compared to like other works. And it doesn't take itself seriously at all. It's really fun, and you still take the story seriously as far as like how much Ash is going through and the insanity that he goes through. Really good performances. The effects are perfect for it. And yeah, no, I really recommend it. And if you get through these first two, I'm definitely gonna be checking out the third one as well, and hopefully the series, which I think it has 2 seasons. I can't wait to see where
At
this.
least 2 seasons. More might have come out, but I've seen 2 seasons.
Yeah, no, I recommend this movie, and I can't wait to see where it goes. All right, Michael, you can close this out.
Yeah. These were 100% my recommendations for this list. So it would only make sense that I highly, highly recommend these. Whenever I think about definitive horror, I think about Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. My go-to Halloween movies, some of my favorite movies now. I think they are brilliantly, radically creative and imaginative and daring and campy and hilarious and memorable in so many different ways. I think they really leave every other Halloween classic in the dust, honestly, even ones that I've been pleasantly surprised by. I think at this point in the list, I think it'll be pretty easy to say that these are my 2 favorite movies on the list by far. I think it's such an interesting world, and whether you look at what the series ended up becoming, or even just within these 2 movies in and of themselves, it seems like an anomaly and a miracle that everything clicked perfectly into place for this film, that all the right notes hit the right way, that it's the perfect amount of camp, the perfect amount of intentionality, and they're such memorable, enjoyable movies. Honestly, I could watch them again tomorrow. So yeah, I love these movies.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we universally love these movies, and like I said, Nathaniel and I are both looking forward to looking into the rest of the series. I also left out, I don't know how I left this out, but this is Sam Raimi. This is Sam Raimi directing it. Sam Raimi writing and directing. And it's not often where you could see a director so early on in their career like hit their their niche tone, and he's really good at this level of horror comedy. And you could even see it in like Spider-Man 2, like specifically in his in the Doc Ock scene. Like it's definitely reflective of like his talent.
Oh
Yes.
yeah.
So that has been our episode of Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. I hope you guys all enjoyed it, and we'll be back to the normal format tomorrow. This is just to give me a little break as far as editing.
This was all just an artistic choice. That's it. No other
Yeah.
reason.
That was wholly it. Next up, we got The Hills Have Eyes. That is another. It's called That Is Another movie directed by. What's his name?
Wes Craven?
Wes Craven. Same
Wes
same
Craven,
director
yeah.
as Friday the 13th.
Nope. Nightmare on Elm Street.
Thank you. I'm usually the one
You're
that's fact check. I'm just trying to go off the top of my head. Oh yeah. It's one that came out before Nightmare on Elm Street, and it's all of our first time seeing it. And it's gonna be an interesting conversation because I'm
Interesting.
not sure where the rest of you guys ended up on it. I definitely know where I fell on the spectrum. Anyway, thank you for joining us again for this episode. We always have a fun time making these. Like and subscribe, and please share this with people. We always like seeing interactions and seeing people comment. I generally do appreciate when you guys do that. Anyway, if any of you got to this far, since it's 26 minutes, yeah, that's it. See you guys later.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.